Hate is a heavy baggage. Life is too short to waste it on evil. She's not worth it. I recently watched a magnificent, in every sense, film, whose name is American History X. A film that touches on a very important problem, the problem of hatred. This story tells us about something we don't know, it just shows us the harsh reality. If we talk about the plot, then we are shown the life story of a family that is going through hard times. The eldest son of the Vinyard family is a very gifted guy, Derek. After the death of his father, he gradually begins to become a different person, due to falling into bad company. Gradually, he is brainwashed, and he begins to commit terrible deeds, because of which he ends up in prison. His younger brother, despite the outcome of Derek's actions, eventually also begins to follow in his footsteps, admiring him as an idol. What will it lead him to? It's clear that nothing good. But Derek does not wish him such a fate, and wants his brother to live his own life. Acting is a separate topic. Insanely pleased with Edward Norton. This actor has repeatedly pleased me with his presence in many films, and this film is no exception. Looking at his character, you really believe him and worry about his fate. I often wonder why such actors are not awarded Oscars. Apparently to give them an incentive to play their best role in the future, but at such moments you think, where is it better? Edward Furlong also pleased with his presence. I haven't seen him anywhere since The Stunning Terminator, and judging by this movie, it's a pity. I would also like to note that the film was shot very beautifully. Black and white flashbacks look unrealistically beautiful. And the whole story is served to us exactly in the order in which it is necessary for a full understanding of the plot and immersion in this atmosphere. I think that everyone should watch such films. Such masterpieces teach us a lot, and if at least some people somehow change their life position after viewing, then the world will already become at least a little, but better. And this is exactly what we need so much right now. The leader of the neo-Nazi group, Derek Vinyard, brings up cruelty to people of a different skin color and his younger brother. Because of this, Dani has problems in his studies. The African-American director tries in every possible way to change the boy's views, trying to instill moral norms in him without resorting to punishments. But everything turns upside down when Derek is tried for the brutal murder of a black criminal who decided to rob his house. Dani continues to adhere to the ideology of neo-Nazis, and his brother, who has been released from prison, is changing dramatically. Derek has discarded his previous beliefs and is trying to get his younger brother out of the Skinhead group. What awaits the heroes next? Excellent acting, the emotions that Derek demonstrates after the murder are amazing. At the same time we see anger bordering on pleasure, and the way it is demonstrated makes a strong impression. This is really the highest acting skill. The nature of fascism is well covered, not only demonstrate violence, but also reveal the psychology of neo-Nazi thought. The film does not divide people into black and white, does not resort to stereotypes, but correctly interprets both sides. For example, dislike of migrants arises not only because of the color of their skin, but also because of the great privileges they do not deserve. Now 2 Negroes are covering my back, although they were taken not because they are black, but because they are the best. This phrase from the film perfectly conveys the whole problem of liberalism. The personality of Derek, why he changed, his motives and rethinking of values in connection with the understanding of all the falsity of faith. The use of ideology and propaganda for the benefit of their own goals of some individuals are perfectly conveyed. A wonderful ending that perfectly conveys the consequences of racism, discrimination, and, as a general thing, Nazism. Minor characters are somewhat stereotypical. The motive for changing Dani's social attitudes is poorly justified. Being a neo-Nazi, he could change his mind, but in the film his motives are insufficient. Because for a person who grew up in such a cultural environment, can history affect his worldview in an instant? Quite a subjective point, but still I think it is not sufficiently demonstrated to be true. As a result, we have an excellent picture, although having the disadvantages that I voiced above, it does not try to be stereotypical, shows different views, different sides, having a clear ending. With clear morals, excellent actors, whose feelings you get into, I think this is definitely a strong work. The leader of the local skinhead gang, Derek Vinyard, firmly holds authority in his neighborhood. Convinced of his rightness, he mercilessly deals with those who have a non-white skin color. Derek's independence and courage are admired by his younger brother Dani, who has also made his choice. But the brutal murder of two black guys committed by Derek divides the brothers' paths. Derek finds himself in prison, where there is a balance of forces, and Dani, at large, successfully continues his brother's work. Until their paths cross again. The events of the film unfold in the late 1980s, mid-1990s. Throughout the picture, the storyline unfolds at different time intervals. The events of the present are made in color, and the past, presented as the memories of the neo-Nazi brothers from the Apostles of Christ gang Derek and Dani Vinyard, are in black and white. At the beginning of the film, the viewer is shown the events of the past. Derek Vinyard kills two of the three blacks who tried to break into his car. Then the action takes place in the present tense. The history teacher, upset by Dani's latest essay, written based on Adolf Hitler's book My Struggle about the ideas of National Socialism, informs the school principal about this. Black director Bob Sweeney gives Dani the task to write an essay about his older brother on the subject of American History X, invented by himself, so that he tries to independently comprehend the events that define the life of the younger generation. At the same time, he sets a condition that if Dani does not submit an essay by the next day, he will be expelled from school. Sweeney assures Dani that the essay will not fall into the hands of a third party. At school, Dani defends a white guy from being beaten by blacks. Bob Sweeney attends a meeting of the investigation team on the case of the Apostles of Christ, as he was previously Derek's teacher, and watched the evolution of his ideas. Investigators are reviewing Derek's archive interview with one of the local TV channels after the murder of his father, a fire department employee, by a black man while extinguishing a fire in the Negro Quarter. The investigation considers this to be the main reason for Derek's decision to become a Nazi. On the way home from school, Dani stops by a basketball court where African Americans play, remembering that once the Skinheads, led by his brother, won this court from them in an amateur match. Then he rushes home to see Derek, who got out of prison that morning. Dani is dating his brother. Meanwhile, his old friend Seth Ryan comes to visit Derek. After talking to family members, Derek and Seth go to a Nazi party, and Dani begins to write an essay, positively assessing his brother's actions and worldview. Among his memories are the Nazi destruction of a store owned by a Korean entrepreneur, the beating and humiliation of his workers, including Koreans, Mexicans, and African Americans, the insult of a Jewish teacher invited to dinner by his mother, and details of the brutal murder of blacks. Friends who have come to Dani interrupt the process of writing an essay. With them, he goes to a Nazi party, where his brother is already present. At the party, Derek tells his girlfriend that he has abandoned Nazi ideas and wants to move to another city, taking her with him, but is refused. After that, he enters the office of the chief ideologist and mentor of the Nazi group, Cameron Alexander. While Derek was serving his sentence, Alexander gathered a large army of skinheads. Derek informs him that he is going to end the past, but during the conversation he loses his nerves when Alexander tries to convince him. He beats up Cameron and makes a big fuss. Derek's ex-boyfriend Seth Ryan points a gun at him, but Vinyard takes it away and, threatening aggressive skinheads with a weapon, runs away from the party with his younger brother. Finding a deserted place, Derek tells Dani a story about the time he spent in prison, where his worldview was seriously tested. He recalls how once in prison he was abused by reputable prisoners with whom he had previously maintained good relations, because he refused to adhere to their opinions and the rules they set. One of his new Nazi friends bought drugs from a Mexican and resold them among whites, but none of his own condemned him. Disappointed in his colleagues, Derek tried to convince them and stopped contacting them, for which he paid. The only friend for him was a black laundry worker, whom he had previously ignored. Also in prison, he was often visited and morally supported by Director Sweeney, who spoke at the retrial in support of Derek and helped him to be released early. The brother convinces Dani that there are both good and bad people among both blacks and whites. After the brothers return home, Dani continues to write an essay describing another of the events that influenced Derek's beliefs, a conversation with his father during a family dinner, in which the head of the family convinced the others that there is discrimination against whites in the United States, and blacks have great rights. The next morning, the brothers have breakfast in a cafe, after which Dani goes to school, and Derek goes to get a job. In the school toilet, a black man, with whom Dani clashed at the beginning of the film, shoots him with a pistol. Derek, who is seeing Dani off, hears gunshots near the school, runs into the building, bursts into the bathroom, and hugs his murdered brother. At the end of the film, Dani's essay is written at the end of the essay, where he quotes the last words of Abraham Lincoln during his inaugural speech in 1861. "We are not enemies, but friends." We shouldn't be enemies. Although the bonds of our friendship are not always strong, they should not be broken. The memory of this friendship will take its toll when our best feelings inevitably prevail in our hearts. American History X, why X? As an option, because this is a reference to the American public figure Malcolm X. Recall that Malcolm X was a black racist. He regarded the white race as a kind of second class. And he considered the black one the cradle of civilization. But this movie does not hint at sympathy for his views. But she hints at something completely different. At first glance, it may seem that this film is primarily about white racism. But looking closer, you can notice one thin, but steel thread. No matter how hard you try, it's almost impossible to break this one. Balancing between a black and white and a color story, American Story X, playing on high emotional notes, misleads us the main character. We begin to share his hatred because we hear the cry of his pain. His wave spreads and covers us in its radius. Against our will, she forces us to sympathize with the hero of Edward Norton. And just as masterfully, American History X breaks our misconceptions, like the notorious rose-colored glasses. Only in this case the glasses are black and white. It shows that reality is not even in many shades of gray. No, it has a multicolored palette and is so multivariate that it cannot be given a final assessment. This is, in fact, the end of the film. He is merciless because he tries to put a bold dot in bloody ink. But it turns out that this point turns into a blob. And in its spreading outlines, the karma of racial mutual hatred closes its vicious circle. Again and again, together with the hero, we are forced to face the question, which is stronger in me, mercy or anger? And the insidiousness is that we understand that anger can be conditioned. It is always conditioned by great suffering. In fact, anger has a right to life. And this is both fair and scary. Fair enough, because the film made us understand the hero. And it's scary, because anger has consequences, in the battlefield of which people who have not had time to understand what is happening fall. Who did not have time to relate to this in any way. This is how karma reproduces itself. The only question remains: where and when is mercy appropriate? And in what most unforgivable cases is it able to have the maximum effect? Watching this film willy-nilly, the viewer begins to identify himself with one side or another of the conflict. Is this the right approach? I think not, because we have to concentrate on the director's statement, on what he wanted to tell us. When viewed, the outstanding, talented image of Edward Norton immediately catches the eye. He plays very charismatic, his character turned out to be colorful. On the one hand, he appears to us as one of the main characters around whom the plot moves. But this hero is the antagonist of the film. The painting does not preach fascism, but it also does not preach tolerance, rather it preaches pacifism. Friendship, unity, something more than we can see in the confrontation of the left and the right. With all the rigidity of what is happening, the film tells us no war, no strife, no enmity.